Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Ronan Halpin is my name. I'm a vet with the Department of Agriculture, and I work in the policy division dealing with the import controls on live animals and animal products, which is obviously what I'm going to talk about. BREXIT is a huge challenge. It crosses so many different areas. We've already heard about the uncertainties, the known unknowns, the unknown unknowns. I can't give you all the answers today, but I hope to point you to some areas where we feel people should be focusing their preparations on to ensure things run more smoothly. So I'll give just a very brief overview of the controls and the import conditions. Many of you may have attended revenue organised seminars through the year where we would have presented in more detail on that particular area. But I'd like to go into some more specific topics: preparing for import, issues around veterinary certificates, composite products, Landbridge, submission of documents, and a couple of other issues. So controls at border inspection posts, border control posts, they're performed at EU-approved border control posts to verify that animals and products entering the EU comply with the animal health and public health guarantees laid down for the commodities. They're mandatory on all products of animal origin and all live animals. They're performed across the EU in the very same way in approved border control posts. So you can bring animals or goods into one member state through a border control post, and they're free for circulation through all member states. And when they arrive at the border control post, we carry out documentary, identity and physical checks. So documentary and identity checks at a rate of 100%, all consignments, and then physical checks based on risk assessment, risk analysis, so there can be reduced physical checks. And all these controls are overseen by the official vet in the border control post. So then in terms of the actual conditions that apply to bringing in animals and products, again, very briefly, for the EU has harmonised conditions across most animals and products we're talking about. They must come from approved countries, so the country must be listed for the specific product or the specific animal. In relation to products, they must come from approved establishments. Food of animal origin, the country must have a residue monitoring plan in place for that particular product. We've already heard about health certificates. They must be accompanied by the agreed health certificate, and then they must be appropriately packaged, labelled and transported. And in relation to animals, obviously transportation and animal welfare is crucial. So what I really want to talk about are those measures that people can take now to make sure that they're ready. So some of this will be relevant directly for yourselves. Some of it may be relevant for your clients, partners. So hopefully through you the message will spread. Okay. So preparing for import. I think I may have skipped a slide. Yeah. We heard about pre-notifications. For animals and products of animal origin, animal products, we require pre-notification using an entry document in traces. So first of all, we're talking about live animals, animal products. They're all listed in a commission decision, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. The entry document you may be familiar with is a CVED or Common Veterinary Entry Document. It's submitted through an EU online system called Traces, 24 hours prior to import. And one important point, each Common Veterinary Entry Document, each CVED, can only relate to one official health certificate. So that's really important when we think about the complexity of some of the loads that will be coming at us. So who is the person that does this pre-notification and who needs to worry about registration? So we talk about the person responsible for the load. Now, for existing third country trade, this tends to be the customs clearance agent. Okay, so it's at company level. They are the person responsible for the load. So there's a requirement then to register in traces. So again, this can be a natural or legal person, quite often the company. But we also need to know who the users are. We need to register individual users. They need to be assigned to the responsible entity so that they can actually log in and generate the CVED. We've learned from a lot of businesses that they may be taking on the customs responsibilities themselves, so equally they will take on the traces responsibilities. But it's so important that in advance companies and users register for traces. As well as that, we look for these same people, the same entities, to register on our corporate client system within the departments. We've tried to simplify all of this and created a single point for all these registrations. So we have a dedicated email address, brexitregistration@agriculture.gov.ie, and all the information is available on our website. So agriculture.gov.ie/Brexit, and follow the relevant links. This is a screenshot of the website, so it goes into some more detail. We have the CCS individual and company forms, and we also have a link to provide us the information for traces. As well as dealing with registration, we've also produced detailed guidelines to help people to complete a CVED. So there are detailed guidelines for creating a new CVED for animal products and also for live animals, 2 separate documents. And again, the link is on the screen. So we'll talk about the list of animals and animal products. When we talk about animal products in particular, we're talking about food of animal origin. So any food containing a component that originated from an animal. We're talking about composite products that contain an animal origin component. So that is, by definition, all composite products contain plant and animal material. We're talking about germinal products. So these are animal breeding products, semen, ova, embryos. And we're also talking about animal byproducts. So animal byproducts are products not for human consumption. So it could be pet feed, animal feedstuffs, materials for pharmaceutical industry, and so on. And particularly in relation to animal feed, while there are separate controls for animal feed, any animal feed containing an animal byproduct is relevant to our discussion here. So it needs a CVED and it needs a health certificate. Hay and straw, clearly not animal products, but they're controlled. There are veterinary controls on hay and straw at the border control post because they have implications for animal health. So I mentioned Commission Decision 2007-275. So all of our live animals and all of our animal products are listed in this Commission Decision. They're all listed by CN code. There's a description of what the code relates to, and then there are explanations and qualifications given. So you may see for certain products there may be certain exemptions, and it'll explain what that exemption might be. For other products it might show what the import conditions are or where you can find them. So it's a really important piece of legislation. You know, I would encourage people to become familiar with it, to become familiar with the CN codes that are contained with it, because when you're entering your SAD and the commodity code in box 44, you will be making a declaration as to whether a CVED is required or not. If you're unsure of the CN code for the goods, obviously revenue, they're the competent authority for the customs systems. So any queries on classification of goods should be directed to revenue. I'm sure you're already familiar with that. They have set up a specific Brexit helpline email address, brexitqueries@revenue.ie. So this is just a screenshot of one section of this Commission decision with the list of animals and goods. So you're very familiar, 0201, 0202, meat of bovine animals. And when you go into traces, or indeed tariff, you'll see that there's a lot of subcodes under that. So I thought it might be helpful if for some of you who haven't used traces before, to give you some screenshots. The very first thing you're asked for when you look to create a CVED in traces for the pre-notification, the very first thing is the CN code. There's about, I think, 99 chapters in the CN code, and I think there's probably about 30 plus listed there. So all of these chapters contain either live animals or products which contain animal products. So when you get past entering your CN code, the details you might expect to include consignor, exporter, consignee, importer, delivery address, Consignee, import or delivery address, that may be the same entity, the same person, the same company. It could be 3 different entities. And you'll also notice 2 boxes here for seal number and container number. So I'll talk about those a little bit later. They're really, really important. So they're also entered on the CVED. Sorry, no, my eyesight isn't the best, and I'm trying to read the screen. I'm going to have to stand a little bit back here to read this. So then you'll ask to enter details on the commodity. And again, I mean, it's pre-populated to some extent by the CN code, and it gives you the possibility to add additional products under that same CN code, or under products which would be related to that CN code. And it does get quite complicated. So if you've entered meat, for example, there may be different chapters within the CN where you can enter an additional CN code in the same CVED, because it's all down to the veterinary certificates, which I'll also go into in a little bit more detail later. But on this screen, there is a couple of important pieces of information: country of origin, country from where consigned. So these can be 2 different countries. Under veterinary documents, we have a veterinary approval number. So this relates to the establishment of origin, the establishment of the animal product. There may be more than one establishment involved in an animal product. You may have a slaughterhouse, cutting plant, processing plant, cold store, and they can all be entered there. You're also asked to enter the purpose. In general, you'll be talking about import, so goods for the internal market, and depending on what the commodity is, it'll have different end purposes. So it might be for human consumption, pharmaceutical use, animal feed stuff, and so on. Okay, so I'd encourage you, if you are going to be using traces, if you're not familiar with traces, to look at the guidance documents and to get yourself registered. Okay, so I mentioned briefly before approved establishments. So I would encourage anyone involved in the supply chain, importers, to ask their suppliers, are their establishments approved? So we're not talking about registrations, we're talking about approval on the basis of inspection by the authorities in the United Kingdom. They not only have to be approved, they also have to be listed. And when we talk about listing, we talk about listing on an EU domain, on an EU website. And products can only be certified from those establishments from when they are listed. So I'd encourage, again, discussions with suppliers to make sure goods are coming from approved establishments. These establishments, like I say, are available on different EU websites. There's an external website external to Traces. I have the link there, and I think this presentation will be made available, where you'll see all the different range of products. And when you go into each one, you'll get a list of establishments, and then there'll be qualifications for some of those establishments, because they might be approved as a slaughter plant or only as a cold store, and so on. If you are the person in Traces, registered in Traces, they're all accessible then through Traces as well. They're separated into food, the germinal products, animal byproducts. Okay. So veterinary certificates. I mean, the veterinary certificate is essentially the currency for trade in animal and animal products. It is the document that provides the animal health guarantees, the public health guarantees. So your CVED that we've spoken about is purely the pre-notification. It brings a lot of information together. Most of it comes from the veterinary certificate. Some of it then will come from commercial invoices in terms of delivery addresses and so on. But the veterinary certificate is key. And there's a couple of important definitions that we need to look at. So place of origin in a veterinary certificate. So the place of origin is the establishment shipping the product in the country of dispatch. That's really important. It can be different to the country of origin. So the country of origin can be the country where the products were finished, produced, manufactured and packaged. And then the country of dispatch itself, in which the place of origin is, that's where the certificate is issued. So the certificate is issued by the competent authority of the country of dispatch. And again, I say this is so important, because you could have other third country product coming into the UK, not under any transit procedure, but having been imported into the UK, into a commercial warehouse, so essentially it's on the market or in free circulation. So that's now the place of origin. The UK authorities have to issue the certificate for that product. So if it's Brazilian chicken that's been imported into the United Kingdom on a health certificate into free circulation, it now has to be certified by the UK authorities. And I know that's going to have impact on a lot of traders. So really important to get the definitions and the understanding of where products are certified from. I mentioned earlier too the seal and container number. So we carry out documentary checks. We look at the CVEDs, the health certificates. We also then carry out an identity check. Are these goods those which are referred to in the health certificate? And I suppose one slight luxury we have on the veterinary side is that we can rely on a seal number and a container number to identify the goods. But we can only do that when it's on the veterinary certificate. So if it forms part of the veterinary certificate, then we can say with a degree of surety that this sealed container is that which is referred to in the health certificate. This then has implications if we're not talking about sealed containers, or if the seal and container number are not in the veterinary certificate. We may have to open the container, unload product, look at different products within the container. We all know the complexity of trade at the moment. There may be multiple products on multiple health certificates. So you can imagine this is going to take more time. It was mentioned earlier by Tom about original certificates. So the legislation requires this original certificate accompanies the consignment. Ship's bags won't be used. We've spoken to many companies who already have plans in place to courier over original veterinary certificates to accompany the loads when they're presented in Dublin Port, for example. Certificates must be issued before export, in essence. So they must be issued before the consignment leaves the control of the competent authority in the country of dispatch, before export, before leaving that country. So if you have goods which have arrived into, for example, Dublin Port, and a certificate has never been issued, it's been an oversight, people didn't realise, it's too late at that stage to get a certificate. The UK won't be in a position to issue a certificate retrospectively. Again, really important, one health certificate per CVED. Back to these complicated loads, back to these mixed loads, there may be animal products, there may be plant products, there may be products requiring controls by other agencies such as HSE. From our perspective, one health certificate per CVED. You can imagine it can get quite complicated with quite a lot of documentation. We'd encourage people to try and consolidate, to try and simplify their loads. I know we're being told that's not necessarily easy or practical, but the implications are that it will take more time to carry out the checks and clear products through the port. I'd encourage the supply chain to talk to suppliers. Ask suppliers, have they engaged with the UK authorities on certification? Do they understand the full implications of veterinary certification? Have they looked at the UK website? There's a lot of detail on the UK websites on obtaining export certification, the process, the timelines that are involved. Have suppliers engaged an official vet to sign these certificates? Is the official vet familiar with the full range of certificates they might be asked to sign? Are they aware of the scale and volumes of certification that will be needed? So, we've had lots of discussions with lots of companies, and sometimes it's really hard to get down into this level of detail. Have you asked suppliers that they are prepared? And have you asked at this level of detail? Looking across all your products, all the different types of certificates that are needed, the volumes of them, have they prepared? Really important. And when we look at certificates themselves, there are just dozens upon dozens of different certificates. So I've just put up an example here of certificates for fresh meat. So we're not talking meat products, we're not talking meat preparations. In this list, we're not even talking poultry. So we've bovine, ovine, porcine. Obviously, they're the main ones, beef, sheep meat, pig meat. but there's 9 or 10 certificates there just for fresh meat. And then you look at poultry, and there are different certificates: meat products, meat preparations, milk products, honey, collagen, gelatin. So there are an awful lot of certificates, and that's only for human consumption. Animal byproducts, there's even more. There's probably 50 or 60 different health certs for different products. And when you think about that, and you look at ranges of products, you realise, you know, a lot of products can't necessarily be bunched on the same certificate. So back to my point, 1 health certificate per 1 seabed. Okay. Our department website, we have a lot of information notes on what the import conditions are for different products. So you'll see products of animal origin there, and if you go into that, you'll see guidance notes on fresh meat, meat products, your poultry products, and so on. Live animal imports, the same, germinal products, animal byproducts. So I'd encourage you to look at the information there. It's still being populated, so there will be some gaps, but we're hoping to have that completed by the end of this week or early next week. And the certificates themselves, they're complicated. In some instances, the suppliers may have to complete the certificates to submit to a system to present to the official vet for signature. I mean, this is one certificate, which happens to be a 4-page certificate. So this is 1/3 of 1 page of a 4-page certificate. And within that small section of the cert, we're talking about food law, we're talking about hygiene and HACCP principles, we're talking about cold chain, ante-mortem, post-mortem inspections, health marks, microbiological criteria for foodstuffs, the residue plans in the country, issues related to TSEs, BSE, and as you go down through the certificate, different options might apply. So suppliers need to be familiar with the certificates that they're asking their contracted official vet to sign, because like I say, they may have to complete certain parts of them. Composite products, another complex area. It's a very simple definition, not. Foodstuffs intended for human consumption that contain both processed product of animal origin, so not raw product of animal origin, but processed products of animal origin, and products of plant origin. And it includes those where the processing of the primary product is an integral part of the production of the final product. So it's quite a definition to get your head around, and from it then defines what the import conditions might be or what the certification requirements might be. Again, we have a lot of detail on our website, so rather than go into some of those details here, I'd encourage you to look at our website, look at the definition, look at the different routes different products, composite products might take. Again, to your suppliers, importers, look at all the product ranges that they're dealing with. Within those, align them with the CN code. Within those, see which ones are composite products, because many will require a veterinary certificate. So, you know, ones containing raw meat, for example. In fact, any composite product containing meat or meat product requires a veterinary certificate. Some composite products can avail of a derogation from a certificate and from presentation at the border. These would be, say, shelf-stable composite products containing less than 50% animal origin. And some are exempted automatically, such as cakes, biscuits, breads, sweets, things like that. But I would encourage you to make sure that those that you're involved with in business, you know, look at their ranges of products, figure out how they're classified, look specifically at their composite products, list them out, see which ones fit into whichever bracket, and even provide us with some details in advance, because the more we know, the more we can help as to which route a product will have to go. So composite products need to be looked at, and we're there to help. Brexit call at agriculture.gov.ie is the route to use. So Tom put up a slide slightly better than this of Dublin Port. So IUPT Yard 1, that's this unified disembarkation terminal for Irish ferries in Stena. Traffic management will deal with routing P&O and C-Truck, but this is a unified terminal. We've heard before that routings will be provided in advance. You'll be told to exit the port, in which case you go through IUPT and exit the port. You'll be directed to the live animal border control post, which is Yard 2. So that'll be accessible directly from the IUPT. Or you'll be directed to T7. So T7 is for customs plus documentary plus seal checks. So we spoke about seal checks and their importance, how they can make things simpler. We won't be opening containers in Terminal 7. We won't be unloading any product in Terminal 7. So if you can manage to go through the controls, relying on a documentary and seal check, once you're finished in T7, you'll be told to exit the port. If there's a further control required, so if a container needs to be open, if we need a physical inspection, you'll be routed from T7 into some of the different physical inspection facilities. So there's T9, T10, Yard 5, which is the existing animal product BIP, and in blue there, I think that's the HSE location. So thinking back, the complexity of consignments, trying to merge them all together, have veterinary certificates for everything, maybe combine them in the most efficient way to avail of a simplified identity check that might be able to be carried out in T7, that might then allow you straight out of the port without having to route to an additional facility. So it's all time and efficiency. Very briefly on Landbridge. So when I talk about Landbridge, I'm talking about transit through the UK of union goods, of animals and animal products. So coming from France into Ireland, again, animals and animal products. Obviously they have to be transported under customs control, customs supervision. They have to come through an approved border inspection post, so we have Dublin Port, Rosslare Port, they are approved. But they do need a documentary check and a 24-hour pre-notification. So you have your import requiring documents and 24-hour pre-notification. For transit, we also are obliged to carry out a documentary check and receive 24-hour pre-notification. Where these are satisfactory, there'll be no further action by DAFM. So we hope to do these in advance electronically, so that from an SPS perspective, from a veterinary perspective, there'll be no intervention as you pass through the port from us. There are a small number of products that require a seal in a health certificate for intra-community trade, so some of the germinal products and a very small amount of animal byproducts. So where a seal is required by current legislation for intra-community trade, you may be directed for a seal check. But in the main, most products will pass through based on a documentary check and pre-notification. And obviously these are all in addition to any customs obligations, so opening and closing transits, authorised consignee premises, consignor premises and so on. I have a couple of additional slides in here which relate to other control divisions. So in relation to animal feedstuffs, I mentioned, it's down near the bottom here, you know, that when an animal feed contains an animal byproduct, it's now an animal product to all intents and purpose and requires a veterinary control at a BIP with a health certificate. There are also some additional requirements for medicated feed. But in the main, for animal feedstuffs, advance notification is required. Only high-risk animal feedstuffs will be checked at Dublin Port, so things like ground nuts. All other feeds will be subjected to risk-based checks, and DAFM is availing of the flexibilities to allow these to take place away from the port, to use third country representative status to provide guarantees, and so on. But if you do have any specific queries, feed enquiries at agriculture.gov.ie. Another topic you may have come across, ISPM 15. This is our wood pallet. So at the moment, there's no requirement for treatment and stamping of pallets that move between the UK and Ireland, or indeed between other member states. But in a no-deal Brexit scenario, when the UK are a third country, movement of pallets in both directions will need the treatment and stamping of the pallet. So from an EU perspective, pallets coming into the EU need to be stamped with ISPM 15, and the UK have iterated their position that wood packaging material, pallets and so on, moving from the EU to the UK must also undergo this heat treatment and marking. So when you're looking at pallets, you may or may not be familiar with the stamp. The format there is in the white background and the lettering and so on, and that's just a snapshot of an actual stamp on a wood pallet. Okay, back to my side of the business, the import controls on animals and animal products. The department has developed an IT system which will interact with customs, will interact with traces, and will also allow submission of documents from yourselves. So we'll look for CVED scanned, colour scanned copy of the health certificates to be sent in to us in advance. There is a legal requirement on the CVED to be submitted 24 hours in advance. The health certificates, not so. However, to allow us time to carry out our checks, I mean, we can't do it real time as things arrive in the port. So if the CVED, if the health certificate could be sent in to us 24 hours in advance, it would greatly facilitate us doing our controls and make it more efficient for you to pass through the port. And then any other supporting documents that you might need to add, such as packing lists and so on. So there is an IT system. Documents can be submitted through dedicated emails to that system. There will be an informational video and more written information too on that submission process, how to label files and so on, and how to access. So they will be available on our website. So the videos on import controls, there'll be a specific video there on submission of documents. So just to summarise briefly, registration's really important. The person responsible for the consignment, the users within that company need to register with traces with the department. Classification of goods, looking at the range of goods, what the import conditions are, looking at the complexity of these loads and how they might be made more efficient, what level of consolidation or simplification can be done to make it easier to present through the port. Veterinary certificates from the approved establishment to the range of certificates, asking suppliers what arrangements they've made in the UK to ensure that goods arriving here have the right certificates. We mentioned the 24-hour pre-notification using CVED and traces. Presenting consignments, again, that's back to your consolidation, your simplification. Availing of the seal and container number in a veterinary certificate to simplify the identity check. And if you have any queries, I'd encourage you to email them in, give us the detail, to brexitcall@agriculture.gov.ie. So that's it. Thank you.